In a packed courtroom, Sophie Green, a woman no one thought could win, faces off against a multi-million-dollar corporation and their powerful legal team. With nothing but a worn binder and a fierce determination, Sophie's about to reveal a legal truth so shocking, it will leave everyone speechless. Will Sophie's quiet brilliance be enough to take down the corporate giants? Or will they crush her without mercy? The stakes couldn't be higher. Stay tuned, because this courtroom battle is about to change everything. The courtroom was alive with the sound of shuffling feet, the clicking of pens, and the whispered chatter of lawyers huddled together in quiet strategy. At the front of the room, beneath the towering columns of the courthouse, Judge Clayton Harrison sat at the bench, his expression stoic and unreadable. His robe cascaded around him like a cloak of authority, a man used to deciding the fate of others with a single motion of his hand. The defendant's table was sparse, the only occupant a woman dressed in a simple, gray sweater, her eyes downcast as she sat motionless. She didn't look like a legal powerhouse. She didn't look like someone who could bring a multi-million-dollar corporation to its knees. To the onlookers and the opposing counsel, she was just another face in the crowd. A woman who clearly didn't belong in a place like this. Her name was Sophie Green, and she had no intention of backing down. As the clock ticked down to the beginning of the hearing, the lawyers for the opposition whispered amongst themselves. Sophie could hear the faint echoes of their laughter, their quiet snickers at her appearance. They all thought the same thing. She doesn't belong here. Judge Harrison, we're ready to proceed. The attorney from the plaintiff's team spoke with practiced professionalism. His suit was impeccably tailored, his words as sharp as his perfectly combed hair. He shot a quick glance toward Sophie before turning his attention back to the judge, confident in the inevitable outcome of the day. But Sophie's eyes never left the judge. The moment Judge Harrison's gavel came down, signaling the start of proceedings, Sophie raised her head slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the worn leather binder resting on her lap. The quiet rustle of paper echoed in the otherwise still courtroom. "Your Honor," she spoke clearly, her voice calm but filled with an undeniable strength that sent a ripple through the room. "I'd like to present Exhibit A." The opposing attorney smirked. He had already written this case off as a formality. He could already picture his client's victory, the luxurious rewards they would reap from this case. But Sophie Green, this simple woman with a quiet demeanor, was about to turn their entire world upside down. The judge, who had previously seemed indifferent, now looked at Sophie with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He adjusted his glasses before turning his gaze to the binder she held in her hands. "Exhibit A?" Judge Harrison asked, raising an eyebrow. Sophie's calmness only deepened the mystery. Her silence was a message in itself, drawing everyone's attention to what she was about to say. As the gallery fell silent, Sophie opened the binder, revealing the meticulously prepared documents, the pieces of evidence that would shape her case. She knew what they were expecting from her, a quiet surrender, a meek acceptance of defeat. But she wasn't here for that. "Your Honor," Sophie continued, her voice unwavering, "I have here the documentation that proves not only the legal misstep made by the opposing side, but also their outright disregard for the law, as well as their attempts to manipulate the court for personal gain." Her words carried a weight that made even the most seasoned attorneys in the room hesitate. The morning light filtered through the small kitchen window of Sophie's modest apartment in the heart of Atlanta. She moved with practiced grace, her hands expertly preparing the ingredients for her usual morning tea. Everything was simple, quiet, predictable, but life hadn't always been this way. 5 years ago, Sophie had been a rising star at one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms, her legal mind sharp, her future bright. She had worked long hours, studying cases and drafting documents for wealthy clients, but something inside her had shifted. It wasn't the long hours that wore her down. It was the disillusionment, the recognition that her work had begun to compromise the very values she held dear. So, Sophie left. Leaving the firm had shocked her colleagues. "You're crazy," they had told her. "You're throwing away your career." But Sophie knew she couldn't continue down that path. She left her prestigious job to work in the community, providing legal assistance to those who could not afford it, to people who needed a voice. But little did anyone know that Sophie had been preparing for this very moment, a case that would show the legal world, and the community at large, that sometimes, the best lawyers are the ones who don't wear suits or flash their credentials. Her clients, often struggling with issues that were too big for them to solve on their own, had become her family. She fought for them with the tenacity of a lion, unrelenting in her pursuit of justice, and now, standing in that courtroom. She was about to prove to everyone that the legal brilliance they thought they had underestimated could not be ignored. The opposing counsel chuckled quietly, their confidence not shaken. They glanced over Sophie's simple clothes, the lack of makeup, the way her hair was loosely pulled back into a bun. To them, it was laughable. How could someone who looked like she belonged in a coffee shop be capable of outsmarting them in the most important case of their careers? "Objection, Your Honor," one of the attorneys said, standing up with a slight sneer. "This is irrelevant. She's wasting this court's time with her amateur research. The law is clear. There's nothing here." Sophie didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she calmly turned the page of her binder and spoke again. "Your Honor," she said, her voice quieter now but still filled with authority, "if I may present Exhibit B, you'll see that this case involves more than just the corporate greed of the plaintiff's side. It involves a deeper violation of civil rights, one that affects an entire community." The courtroom fell silent. Everyone was watching. No one had expected this. No one had expected Sophie Green to stand there, representing herself, and to do so with the brilliance of a seasoned litigator. Sophie's hand hovered over Exhibit B, a legal document that would expose the underhanded tactics of the opposition. She looked at Judge Harrison, who was now listening with rapt attention. "Your Honor," Sophie continued, "I ask that you read through this carefully. The law is not simply about transactions, numbers, or profit margins. It is about justice, and justice demands that we protect the rights of the people, especially when it concerns their homes and their livelihoods." The tension in the room mounted as Judge Harrison flipped through the pages of Sophie's documents. The attorney from the opposing side stood frozen, unable to believe what was unfolding before him. Sophie's quiet demeanor, her unassuming appearance, had lulled him into a false sense of security, but now, the weight of her legal brilliance began to sink in. "Miss Green," the judge said slowly, his tone much softer now, "I must admit, I did not expect such a thorough presentation." Sophie nodded, but there was no triumph in her face, only the quiet determination that had driven her every step of the way. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, "but there's more." The tension was palpable. The room, filled with confident lawyers and powerful businessmen, now watched in stunned silence as Sophie continued to lay out her case with precision. No one had seen it coming, not the way Sophie had prepared for this. What had started as an open-and-shut case for the plaintiffs had turned into a battle for justice that none of them had anticipated, and with each piece of evidence Sophie presented, the ground beneath them shifted. "Your Honor," Sophie said, her voice strong and unwavering, "I move that this case be dismissed in light of the overwhelming evidence we've presented." The gallery behind her held its breath, the tension thick in the air. The opposing counsel stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Before quickly regaining composure, they whispered frantically among themselves, scrambling to mount a defense. But Sophie was no longer just the woman they had underestimated. She was a force, and the court was now hers. Judge Harrison glanced down at the stack of documents, each one a testament to Sophie's years of quiet preparation. Her work was impeccable, her argument airtight. She had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this case was not about development or progress. It was about the community, about the people whose lives were at stake. "Miss Green," the judge said, his voice heavy with respect, "I believe you've made your case." Sophie nodded, but there was no gloating. She had never wanted this to be about winning. It had always been about righting a wrong, and now, as the judge deliberated, she could feel the weight of the courtroom lift from her shoulders. The victory, when it came, would belong to the people she had fought for, the people she had never stopped believing in. The moment Judge Harrison made his ruling, the courtroom erupted into stunned silence. Sophie had won, but it wasn't just the case she had won, it was the respect she had earned, not through her clothes or her appearance, but through her brilliance, her dedication, and her unshakable belief in justice. The battle was over, but the impact of her victory would be felt for years to come. The people had their champion, and her name would be remembered long after the courtroom doors closed behind her. As Sophie left the courthouse, the world now aware of her brilliance, it was clear that her journey was far from over. Her victory today was not just a personal triumph, it was a victory for all those who fight in the shadows, underestimated and overlooked. If you believe in the power of perseverance and the strength of the human spirit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story to inspire others who may be facing their own battles. Sophie's story reminds us that sometimes, the most powerful voices are the quiet ones. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance or background? Or witnessed someone else who proved everyone wrong with their brilliance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation and celebrate those who rise above adversity. Remember, you might just be one breakthrough away from changing everything. Keep fighting, and never stop believing in your own power.